Hey folks, welcome back to the Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Merle, and I'm so excited once again to be able to share with you one of my favorite brand new things to do, and that is to share stories of people who have real stories, basically, in our series entitled My Story, My Words. And today we got a very special guest here on the program. He is a 2019 heart transplant recipient. His name is Brady Ulrich, and he's going to be sharing his story with us today. I've been in contact with Brady and following his story for quite a bit of time right now, and I'll tell you, he's got an impressive story to tell. If you name something that you could possibly have to go through as far as preparing for transplant and having a transplant, I promise you, Brady has already been through it, and you're going to be inspired by the story that he has to tell. So, Brady, with that being said, I'm glad to have you here on the program, and if you don't mind, how about telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I sure appreciate you having me on the program, Jim. Thank you. Like Jim said, my name is Brady. I have lived in southeast Idaho almost my whole life. I am currently 41, been married about 20 years, and have 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 son.
You sound like you're on a similar path to what I was back then. I've got 5 children now, but we're a very similar age, and that number of years being married is definitely an accomplishment nowadays. So I'm excited that you've made it thus far, and I know you're going to continue to do absolutely great. Tell me about this, and we're going to jump into some of the other questions in a moment. Being married as long as you have, I'm assuming, was your wife your main caregiver during all of this?
Well, during part of it she was. So for the first few years she was, and then I had to travel out of state for, we'll talk about it later, like you said, both an Lvad and my transplant. And so she actually stayed here in Idaho and, kept working and kept the kids in school and tried to keep some kind of normalcy for them. And I actually was able to live with family, luckily, in Utah while I went through all this.
Okay. Well, that's great that you had someone to step in like that. And I've definitely been there, done that, got the card. As far as the normalcy you're talking about, when I was going through transplant, I had only 2 of the 5 children that I have now, but those 2 were rather small. They were in school, and so it kind of made things a little bit difficult to deal with. And one of the things I needed more than anything during that period for myself was just to know that they had stability at home. And so I'm sure that's something that you guys were trying to accomplish. Tell me a little bit about this. Obviously, if you end up with a transplant, you needed one. And if you needed one, there was a reason behind it. So how did you first become acquainted with, or how were you first introduced to transplant? What brought you down this road?
Yeah, so that's kind of a funny story in and of itself. So we drove down to southern Utah to go see like Zion's National Park, and they have a few other parks like that down there. We just pulled into little town Cedar City, Utah, and got things loaded up in the motel or hotel. I can't remember what it was. And I was completely out of breath, just loaded in a couple suitcases. And I told my wife, I said, I think I need to go get checked out. I think I have something, maybe pneumonia or something going on, because, if we're going to be hiking for, we plan on being down there about a week. Mm-hmm. If we're going to be hiking for a week, I'm not feeling up to it. So so we she said, yeah, we will. Let's eat dinner first. And as we sat there, I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was going to pass out. And so we kind of started to panic, and I was able to make it down the stairs barely to the car. And she started driving me to this hospital, and none of us obviously knew the area. We didn't know where we were going. Mm-hmm. And at one point she missed a turn and had to flip a U-turn. And sure enough, a cop turns on his sirens, and we're getting pulled over.
Oh no.
I can't breathe. I can't talk. My wife is bawling, like she's super emotional because she doesn't know what's going on with me, and she's getting pulled over on top of it. And, with all the emotions, she's not thinking clearly, obviously. She gets out of the car to try to explain to the officer, that we're going to the hospital. And he pulls his gun on her and tells her to get back in the car. Oh. It was so and then my 3 kids, of course, are in the back of the car wondering if both mom and dad are going to die tonight.
Oh, man.
And, but the officer obviously calmed down and approached the car, and my wife was able to panically get some words out and explain we're trying to get to the hospital. We had an emergency, and so he escorted us to the hospital and called ahead. So yeah, when I got to the hospital, I was seen by a couple doctors. I got a second opinion while I was there. The first doctor said, "Yeah, I think you have a really bad case of pneumonia because you're retaining a lot of water." And then the second doctor said, "No, that's not pneumonia. You're retaining a lot of water because you have severe congestive heart failure."
Wow.
So that was kind of where I first got diagnosed. And then as far as being introduced to transplant, that doctor said, "Well, we have a really good cardiologist in St. George, but he's on vacation. And so I'm going to give you some water pills and just have you drive back to Idaho and go see a cardiologist there," which in hindsight probably wasn't the best idea. I mean, my ejection fraction was only like 20%.
Right.
But so we drove back to Idaho at Idaho Falls, maybe, I don't know, a long drive, 8-9 hour drive. And then I got into the cardiologist and actually saw a team. There's a couple cardiologists there, and one of them I really liked because he said, "I think we can do this with medication and diet and exercise. I think you can live a long, healthy life." And a lot of people have CHF. And the second doctor said, "Well, I think there's something else going on here, and I think you're going to need advanced therapies, possibly an Lvad and possibly a heart transplant." And so I really disliked her, and I didn't want to see her again. But it turned out she was right, and she kind of prepared me mentally for this whole journey.
Wow. So you dodged, as we would say in the South, you dodged quite a few bullets there along the way. One, you're on vacation, about to, I guess, go hiking for a week. And if you had made that mistake, that would have probably been your last. If your wife had not been, I guess, if someone hadn't stopped to finally listen to her, she would have got arrested and you'd have died there. So you really had it. Now, when you went back toward Idaho, did you go straight to the emergency room when you got back in town? How did you get in to see the cardiologist at that point?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I went straight to the ER, and then they got me into a cardiologist that was. I did kind of skip part of the story. They got me into a cardiologist that was specialized in like heart arrhythmias. Mm-hmm. It was kind of his specialty. And I didn't realize there was different cardiologists at the time. And so I actually saw him for probably 3 or 4 months trying different medications and water pills to try to keep the water off. And then finally he threw his hands up in the air and he said, "You know what, this is more complicated. I'm going to refer you over to this other team of doctors that specialize in congestive heart failure and advanced heart therapy." And I'm sure glad he did, because those are the two doctors I talked about at the beginning there.
Right. Well, the good news is, out of that, just what I've heard so far, is even though, yeah, it was a whirlwind story there to begin with, you did get a little time to focus and concentrate and try some other things and, weigh out a few options, inadvertently anyway, with the doctor, like you say, the rhythm specialist. He was able to try a few things to be sure which direction y'all needed to head, I guess.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
Okay. So you pretty much got second and third opinions built in even on that. Now, so they mentioned pretty quickly then, within a few months anyway, they mentioned pretty quickly the possibility of Lvad, transplant, that sort of thing. So you're hearing the words associated with your name. How long did that process take before you had to take the first step beyond medication?
Yeah, so this trip that I'm talking about and the diagnosis was April 2016. I mentioned I was about 20% ejection fraction. So that the one doctor, proved to be correct to an extent, with my water pills and, like we know of a handful of other medications, I was able to get that ejection fraction from 20% all the way up to 40%.
Oh, okay.
And that was about 2 years, almost exactly. So that was till 2018. And then, I like to keep things interesting. So I just decided to completely crash one night, and my ejection fraction I found out was well below 10. And I called a sister that lives close, and she drove me to the ER, and we started that journey. So
Right. Okay. Now, when you say you crashed one night, what did you have, a heart attack? What type of situation happened there?
Yeah, it was. I don't know exactly what happened, to be honest with you. I just I was retaining water. I could tell I was getting tired and weaker. And over the last 2 years, I'd been to the ER and to the cardiologist so many times. It was kind of later at night, and Edie, my wife, asked me if I thought I should go to the ER, and I said no. They're not going to do anything. They're just going to give me my water pill in IV form, and I can just go home and take an extra water pill and get this water off, or so I thought. And so I don't know exactly what caused that crash, but to go all the way down on the ejection fraction, but I thought I could manage it myself. And then in the middle of the night, I just woke up gasping for air and couldn't catch my breath. And luckily, was able to get to the ER again.
Ooh, that'd be scary to wake up in that condition, having thought you could handle it. And I know I've been there, done that too, where you feel like you've got everything under control. And especially if you've been going down this road already, like you have for a couple of years, you just don't, no matter what they tell you, you don't expect that crash is coming, but sometimes it does.
Right, exactly. Yeah, in hindsight, I shouldn't have been so stubborn, right?
Well, it is what it is. I was stubborn for about 6 years myself, and at hindsight, I'm still glad that I was. Every day that I had prior to transplant's a day I've gained, any way you look at it. So, yeah, I've definitely know what that's all about. So, you end up crashing, you get back again in the emergency room situation, and now they're talking a good bit more seriously, I guess, than about other options. Is that right?
Well, not quite yet. So at this point, they're just trying to keep me alive. I'm in Idaho Falls at this point with both doctors are there with me, with this new, advanced therapy team, and they just trying different medications. That what they're trying to do at this point is get me stable enough to life flight me down to Utah, to the transplant center. So the transplant center I went to is called Intermountain Medical Center. It's in Murray, Utah. And one of the cardiologists there in Idaho Falls actually did her clinicals or rotations down there, and so that's why she's closely affiliated with them. But they're just trying to get me stable enough at this point to even get me life flighted down there. And so they do a couple different IV medications. They called it rocket fuel, is what the term they used. I don't know exactly what it was. I imagine just from hearing people in different groups, maybe Millerone, or
probably
that's what it's called.
Yeah, more than likely Millerone, and it will cause, what it'll do, it'll cause your heart to squeeze a little harder, and so the ejection fraction theoretically can go up. It can give you a boost of energy. Doesn't always do that, but it definitely buys some time. So yeah, rocket fuel it is.
Yeah. So the doctor said, well, after I hook up this second IV, it's going to give you a boost of energy, and you'll be up doing jumping jacks. And I remember I passed out again. I was in and out of consciousness for about 3 days during this process. And I remember I passed out again, and eventually I came to, and I looked at her and I said, "Doctor, it's not working." And she said, "I know."
Yeah.
I know it's not working.
Forget the jumping jacks. It's not happening today.
So then she said, we just got a third medication on board, and that's probably why you woke up. So I think you're stable enough. With this third medication, we're going to be able to get you life flighted. So then they go to life flight me, and I have two great big IV poles, and they can't fit me on the helicopter. With I'm 6'3" and two IV poles, and so they throw me in an ambulance and have to take me to the airport to get me on a jet plane.
Oh, wow.
to life flight me down there.
So you wait on all that, and you don't even get your helicopter ride, but you get a jet. I mean, that's high class there.
That's right. So then I finally get down to Murray, Utah, at Intermountain Medical Center, and it was really kind of an emergency situation.
Right.
A lot of people ask all the time, well, how did you make the decision if you wanted the LVAD or not? I said, well, there was no decision to make. It was, we're doing a workup and you're getting an LVAD or you're gonna die. So, you didn't have much of a decision process at that point.
Right. So I'm assuming then you're not very familiar with an LVAD when you're facing it then much, right? You're having to go into this a little bit blind.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I mean, the doctor talked about it once or twice and scared me, and I didn't like talking to her, so I went to this other doctor as often as possible. And so I'd seen a picture of it on the wall, but I really didn't know anything about it.
Right. It is strange how we really all are about the same. We love to hear what we hear. And if somebody's telling us what we want to hear, we enjoy that. But, sometimes the doctors have to do the back opposite of what we would want them to. So you end up getting the LVAD fairly quickly then after that discussion, right, after this trip?
Yeah, so it took a little while to get me stabilized where they thought I could survive the surgery.
Right.
I think it was about 7 days until I actually went into surgery. And that LVAD surgery was horrible to say the least. It was they kept me in a medical induced coma for about 2 weeks before I could wake up, and actually survive the surgery. But it was that recovery. I was so weak and so sick going into that first surgery that the recovery was just brutal. in my, I'm sure other patients have had it a lot worse than me, but just in my opinion, it was a rough recovery road.
Yeah, and but I've heard very similar from others. Now, again, there are some success stories. I've got a good friend. He absolutely despised the idea of an LVAD, didn't want to do it, fought it, ended up getting it, and it was within a matter of a few weeks. He said, I don't know if I want a transplant. This is working so good, for him. But I do hear a lot of people who've gone through, obviously, the LVAD and eventually the transplant who look back and say, wow, the LVAD was much worse as far as the recovery and the surgery and such as that. So I hate that you had a difficult time.
Yep,
How long did you stay on the LVAD then?
Yeah, I was very blessed or very lucky. I had some liver enzyme issues, so it took about a month to get those resolved before I could get listed.
Mm-hmm.
But total time on the LVAD was only 7 months until I was transplanted. So it was very fast.
So then what were you listed for transplant officially? What, 4 or 5 months, something like that, or?
Probably about 5 months, maybe a little over 5 months. I was actually listed for transplant.
Yeah, they're changing things a little bit now. You were kind of in between my day. I was 2013 going through all this. You're 2018, 19, so obviously different time frame. But that having to wait 2 or 3 months to get listed, or to maybe in some cases get relisted, it's pretty common. So. But still no fun at all. Even if you know there's something else around the corner, it's no fun at all. So you wait on the list, however long that is, 4 or 5 months possibly. Tell me a little bit about what it was like actually getting the call for transplant. Were you in hospital at that point or back home? How did that work?
Yeah, so I was living with the LVAD. I was staying with a sister there down in Utah. One of the papers they made me sign is I had to stay within an hour of the hospital. Mm-hmm. With the LVAD as well, obviously with the waiting on the transplant, they want you super close. So I was only about 15 or 20 minutes from the hospital, and I'm a Christian, not that matters, but it added special meaning for me just because I got that transplant call on Easter Sunday.
Oh, wow.
And so it was very, not only an emotional thing, but I think kind of a spiritual experience as well to get that call from me.
Yeah, well, you get your resurrection of sorts at that point, so that's definitely a plus and a motivator for you as well to to be grateful, I guess you would say, for the gift even more so.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So you get the call, you end up back, right, you're close by, so you end up going straight to the hospital. How smoothly did the call go? Did you know right up front it was going to be yours, or did you feel like maybe you were a part of a false call, or what?
Yeah, so there was a chance, obviously, that it wouldn't be a match or there'd be an issue there. So they get me prepped up Sunday night, and then the plan is to go into surgery Monday. And actually, I take that back. I think I didn't end up going into surgery until early Tuesday morning, just because of the nature of how everything played out. But it, that ended up being my one and only call. So it ended up working out. Everything matched up, well, and ended up being a healthy heart. So it was that second surgery was a lot easier. I was in and out of the hospital in less than 2 weeks. I was released less than 2 weeks after the transplant. So
that's awesome. All right. Well, then that just brings us right at the point. Tell us a little bit about your recovery. I mean, you're out of the hospital. Did you get to go home, or did you stay around Utah for a while? How did that work?
Yeah, they were pretty strict on that, and I don't know if they're as strict anymore, but they made me agree to stay within an hour of the hospital again for a full year.
Oh, wow.
Post-transplant. So all in all, I was away from my wife and kids, about a year and 7 months. They obviously came down on the weekends and visited and stuff, but that was probably the hardest part of my recovery is, not being with my family. I'm living with my sister. I have other siblings and parents that are there. My parents were there a lot. And then other siblings that come visit. My wife and kids come visit, but it's just not the same,
Yeah.
Living out of state and living in somebody else's house. So that was probably the worst of my recovery. And then I did have some issues with CMV that I got from my donor as well. Those were handled with Valsite and other medications.
Right.
So.
Well, I live in state with my transplant center. We're depending on traffic, an hour and 15 minutes away. I was asked to stay within 15 minutes of the hospital, which I did for 6 weeks after transplant. But 6 weeks in a year is a whole different animal. And in the similar situation though, you do all you can do. I mean, if I had my choice of anybody being there, it was my wife and my children, and that's not very easy to accomplish, and certainly not a whole state away like that. So your recovery, other than CMV, tell me a little bit about the recovery itself. How has that gone for you?
It's gone well. I can't complain. I haven't been re-hospitalized. I haven't had any serious issues that way. I'm constantly comparing myself to other stories. Look at people that are able to exercise and able to hike and do all these things. And unfortunately, I'm not quite there yet. I mean, I can walk on the treadmill for 20 or 30 minutes, and I've done a little bit of weights with physical therapy. But unfortunately, I don't have the the strength and the energy and the stamina that I want yet. And I'm just barely getting to the point where I'm applying for jobs and trying to get back to work. Right. So it hasn't been perfect, but it hasn't been, I can't complain either because I haven't had any serious issues. It's just, it's just been slow getting my strength and my endurance back.
Right. And, I talk to a lot of people in your situation. Matter of fact, I got one, I can look at the mirror. I can look right in the mirror and see me, where you just don't ever quite get to where you probably thought or hoped you would. You're still thankful. I mean, you're grateful for the opportunity to live. You're grateful for the ability
definitely.
you have. But I think it is good that other people can hear this, though, that there are those stories, and they're not fairy tales, they're true, but there are those stories where people, wow, I mean, they bounce back and they're stronger and better than they ever were, and just, it's like nothing ever happened to an extent. But there are more stories, more like ours, where you get back to an average state of life where you're just, you're probably not where you want to be. You're better off than you probably, well, you're obviously better off than you would have been, but you're probably better off than you should be even, but just not where you want to be. So as long as people can understand that we're all different and their reactions are going to be different, but this may not be the magic pill that solves everything. It's just, as I say it so many times, transplant is a treatment, not a cure. And so it's a part of the treatment. It's something else you're going to deal with. Again, a good treatment and a way to go, but not always the fix-all that people might assume it was. So people, I'm saying that, and I'm sure Brady's saying the same thing. Don't get your hopes up to be somewhere you won't be, but certainly don't get your hopes down if you're not. You reach to your level, and you set the bar a little higher than you expect, and keep reaching for that. And if you need to move the bar up, move it up, and go with it like that. So recovery then pretty well, actually, if not ideal for what you really wanted. So tell me this then. This question, go ahead.
I was going to say the recovery has been really well, and I'm almost there. I'm coming up on 2 years post-transplant, and I really feel like I'm almost there. The term I think of a lot is I'm you hear you want to be here to watch your kids grow up, and I've been here for the last 2 years watching my kids grow up, but I think I'm finally turning the corner where I can actually participate in them growing up instead of just watching from the sidelines, right?
Absolutely.
I can actually get on the floor and play with them again, that kind of thing.
Yes, that's a blessing. That is a definite blessing within itself. So tell me a little bit about this then, and this might be kind of difficult for you. Tell me what you believe, and this will be your opinion, obviously. What are both the best and the worst things you've experienced as a result of transplants? So the best and the worst.
I would say the best thing that's come out of this is my desire and my ability to connect with people and to rebuild those deep, meaningful connections, with my kids, with my spouse, with my siblings and parents, and even friends that I hadn't talked to forever. There's something that happens to us, I think, when we almost die or we actually do die, obviously a couple times during these surgeries, where it kind of puts our mind in a different frame of mind. And, I think that's the best thing that's come out of this is I've been able to obviously be here and spend time with people, but actually, not take those relationships for granted and actually build deep, meaningful relationships.
I can't argue with that at all. And it's all about the mindset, the attitude, and taking advantage of what opportunities you do have then. So that's definitely positive within that. So what about the worst? Is there anything that you've had to deal with you didn't really want to face?
I really, like I said, I really can't complain post-transplant. The worst thing with this whole experience was just getting to the trials of getting to the transplant. But that's in the end it's definitely all worth it. I would go through it all over again. All the being away from the family, I think I mentioned before, was probably the worst part of it all. But I would do it all over again just because the end result is worth it.
Right. I say a lot of times, and I've had entire programs about it. Others agreed, but about the weight being the worst part, and it is. But I think it's not just the weight; it's how that weight happens. And for you, it was separation, and being separated from your family made, I'm sure, things extremely difficult there for a time. And even though you would go through it again, you're probably not waving your arms, wanting to be the next man up, but. But yeah,
That's right.
you do what you have to do for your family and for life. And so you're glad for that opportunity, and you take it if you had to, I'm sure, once again. Well, then let's close with this, and I'm excited to hear what you'll say based on some of your answers already. But what would be the advice, if you had some advice you wanted to give to someone maybe who's either waiting for transplant or shortly they're out of transplant? What's the best advice you can give them for long-term survival and for living a good life?
I don't know if I have anything unique to say that's different than what everyone else has said or other people have said, at least in the past. But I think it's important to realize that all of our journeys are different, and your experience is going to be different than mine and different than other people you hear on the channel. And it's important to listen to your medical team and do what they want you to do. Us that are younger in transplant, this is maybe a weird way to look at it, but the best thing you can do for survival is to be exactly obedient to what they ask you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And for me at least, it's because I know I'm going to need a second heart eventually. I'm only 41 years old, and if this heart lasts me 25 years, or less, I'm going to need a second heart eventually, and I'm not going to get approved for that second heart if I'm not following the rules along the way for the next 20 years or however long that may be. So, that might sound cliche, but do what they ask you to do, and they know what's best, and they'll help you along the way with changes or other things that need to come up in the future.
Right.
So
I think that's excellent. I mean, it's just it's reality. It's accepting reality that this transplant, I mean, yeah, there are several people lately who have crossed the 30 some odd year mark, one right at the 40-year mark. But you're similar to me, you're younger, so you do the math and you think about the math and you say, well, wait a minute, I'm planning to live longer than that. So if I have to do this again, I will. And you got to be prepared. You want to be, not only you want to be compliant and you want to live the longest you possibly can now, which listening to your team is one of the better ways to do about doing that, but you want to be that ideal candidate to where if something should ever come up, then your team looks at you and says, oh, no problem at all. This guy right here, I mean, he's been a champ for X number of years. He's done everything we ask, and he'll do it again. And with technology advancing like it is, who knows how long we could actually make it on this opportunity, or if another should come, what that would result in. So I think you're smart to think that way. It's great advice.
Well, I appreciate it, Jim. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed visiting with you today.
Well, definitely appreciated your story. It wasn't exactly what I knew, the part about the Easter Sunday stuff, but I did not know what all you went through to get to that. And definitely an adventure for sure. And it sounds like you're the kind of guy that would love a good adventure as far as a hike and getting out in the outdoors. So hopefully you'll be able to do that again real soon and be able to spend the life that you've, I know, always hoped for and dreamed that would come about. So I definitely appreciate it, Brady. Let me add to anyone who is listening, if you got any questions or comments you'd like to add, I know you can drop them in the comments below this video. That would be great. And I know Brady would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have as well. He's a part of the Transplant Helper community, so he's going to be wanting to help and guide you along the way. Also, if you're interested in telling your story I would be excited to help to share your story with as many people as could hear about it. So you can be sure to reach out to me. Again, comment below the video. Go ahead and send me a text. Will be a good way to go about doing that. My number is 256-733-1214. And I promise you I'll respond back, and we'll see what we can get together. But again, Brady, thank you so much for being a part of the program today, and I look forward to sharing your story in the very near future.
Thank you again, Jim. Sure appreciate it.
All right. And to everyone else listening, piece of advice from us both. Stay stronger, my friend.